Hello, and welcome to the 16th episode of the Fiber of My Being podcast, a podcast about knitting and spinning and crochet and all the other fiber arts. My name is Megan, and I am the host of this podcast, and I want to apologize in advance for all of the fidgeting, because I think I've mentioned I'm a fidgety person, but I'm feeling particularly fidgety today, so I'm sorry about that, but I think that's what, that's part of what makes me so interested in the fiber arts, because it's like productive, socially acceptable fidgeting. So yeah, I'm sorry for the fidgeting, but I'm also not sorry, because that's why I'm here in the first place. And I live in Pennsylvania with my husband Paul and our 3 cats, and you can see them over here. I can't actually tell from the camera which one's which, because Agatha and Mary are both out, and they're both tuxedo kittens, and they're both pretty big now. Mary's like 8, and Agatha's like 1, but she's almost as big as Mary. And then our 3rd cat is Esther, who's a gray tabby, and who is not out because she and Mary are not feeling the love today. And I guess I should mention, I'm filming this on Valentine's Day because it's one of the few days that I don't have work this week. So I'm getting into the Valentine's Day spirit. I'll talk a little more about what I'm wearing in a minute. But yeah, so happy Valentine's Day, even though I know I won't have this podcast up until at least a few days after Valentine's Day. But still, I'm hoping that you're having a happy Valentine's Day, as I am while I'm filming this. And you can find me on Ravelry as Fiber of My Being, and also on Instagram as Fiber of My Being. And please also check out the Ravelry group, the Fiber of My Being podcast group. That's a mouthful. For discussions and to introduce yourself a bit, and just to talk about how much we love knitting or any of the fiber arts. I would love to hear from you there. And then, okay, so I'll talk quick about what I'm wearing. I'm wearing this as part of my resolution to free the foes. I'm totally shamelessly copying Katie of Inside Number 23 for that, because she's the one that came up with it, so thanks for that, Katie. And this is one of my earlier garments. It's actually crocheted. It's got this nice puff stitch base, and then on the other side is a braid made from 3 separate strands of crochet. There's a puff stitch strand and just a basic double crochet strand, and then a post stitch, like almost ribbing looking strand. And so you crochet each of those strands separately and then braid them together and join them to the rest of the scarf. And then there are 3 little buttons. Well, not so little. They're not little at all. 3 buttons here. And this pattern, I'm saying a lot about this pattern, but it's because it is a free pattern. And the pattern is, I just looked up the pattern name. It's on the Moogly blog. So it's by Tamara Kelly. And the pattern is Madly in Love Cowl. It was I believe this was one of her first mystery crochet alongs. Yeah, it was. So when I first got into the fiber arts, it was mostly crochet, and I mostly didn't have any books or things to teach me. So I went to the internet, and I found some great tutorials, and some of those tutorials were on Moogly, where I also found lots of wonderful free patterns by Tamara Kelly, and also lots of wonderful free pattern roundups that she would do of different, like, she would do a 10 pattern roundup of different Irish crochet patterns for St. Patrick's Day, or different crocheted car patterns, or I don't know, just random stuff. And I thought that was really awesome. So I spent a lot of time crocheting lots of patterns from Moogly. And so I thought it would be a good, appropriate thing to kind of throw back to all the good times I found from Moogly a bit. So, and it doesn't hurt that this was her Valentine's Day mystery Cal thing called Madly in Love. And it's nice and red, and I got the pink shirt, and it just feels very Valentine's Day. So that's what I'm wearing. And then before I get to finished objects, I also want to talk a little bit about what I've been doing on Instagram lately, because there's this challenge going around. It's a month-long challenge for the month of February, and it's called the Yarn Love Challenge. So if you follow me on Instagram, you may have seen me posting some things about this. I found it a day late, but I caught up really quickly. And I've just been having a lot of fun going down the list. There's somebody created a picture of a list of what each day of the Yarn Love Challenge is about. So yesterday was Selfie Day. I know today, because it's Valentine's Day, is the Yarn Love Challenge Day, or it's the Yarn Love Day. So you'll be seeing my Yarn Love in a little bit. But let's see, there's a day on travel projects, and a day on what you're wearing, and there's a cat over here. No. Mary. Do you hear her? So, what was I even talking about? Yarn Love Challenge, that's right. So yeah, there's just a different prompt for every day, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. And so, because of the Yarn Love Challenge, I've been getting lots of progress done, but it mostly hasn't been knitting. So yeah, I will be showing you that in just a minute, because most of my Yarn Love Challenge FOs are, well, FOs. Most of my Yarn Love Challenge projects are FOs, is what I should have said. So yeah, how about I just get right down to it. So, first off in the FOs is something that was a whip last week. And that is, I don't remember which one of these I had made last week, but I had one skein of this yarn spun up last podcast, and now I have two. This is my hemp yarn. It's my very first plant fiber yarn that I've spun up, and I'm just really happy with it. This is just the tail that I tied off with, so my yarn is not fraying. Same with this. But let me show you close up. I spun this wet like flax to try and keep the flyaways down, and it still has some flyaways, but I kind of think that that makes it look like a plant fiber. So I'm okay with that. And it actually holds its shape really well. I was expecting plant fiber yarn to be a lot more kind of droopy. And I mean, if I shake it enough, it is droopy, but it actually holds its shape fairly well. And so this is the other skein. And I just spun this into a single and then two-plied it. I'm pretty boring about that right now. Most of my yarns are now just two-plied because I want as much yardage as I can get, but I want the strength of a plied yarn. So here is my first plant fiber. Super excited about that. And then, so that's my first Yarn Love Challenge FO. Next, more yarn. These are also, anytime you see fraying on my yarn, it's not actually fraying, it's just the ends that I tied stuff in with because I can't bring myself to cut off any of the yarn because it's fiber and it's wonderful, and why would you want to cut it off and throw it away? And so this is the white bat of mystery wool that I was given along with the spinning wheel that my aunt is letting me borrow, which is in the corner, and you can't see it, but I'm pointing to it anyway, like a dork. So this was kind of a bat. I started spinning this first. When I first got the spinning wheel, I was like, this looks like a good thing to practice on, and then it turned out it really wasn't. So I went on to the other wools she gave me and then moved on to my own. But I decided it was time to finally finish spinning this up. So I did. And it's not perfect. It's pretty kind of lumpy and bumpy. But I guess that's kind of the nature of a bat yarn. Because bats are kind of lumpy and bumpy anyway. So yeah. But I'm pretty happy with how it turned out once again. And so one of these skeins, and I can't remember which one again, one of these skeins was already done, I believe. No, maybe it wasn't. Okay, one of these skeins was made from freshly spun singles, and the other one was made from really, really rough singles that I had spun when I first started trying to spin this bat. And then I just wound them off into balls and went, well, that's a lot of wool wasted. But then I was like, why is it wasted? I can still ply it. So I did. I just plied a couple balls together. And so, can't remember which skein is which, of course. But I ended up spinning most of the rough singles. There are still a few left in a basket in my corner. But, yeah, not enough to make a really substantial skein. So maybe I'll just use them to, like, kind of spin little bits of wool into other yarns sometimes. We'll see. Yarn number 2. So that already is 4 skeins of yarn. 2 hemp and 2 Mystery Batt wool. Next up is a spinning whip that was kind of long languishing. I had started this on my drop spindle, but it was not really the best wool for spindling. So I decided to spin the rest into singles on the wheel this week, and then I plied the spindle-singles with the wheel singles. I can totally talk. I'm sorry. I wasn't feeling so well this morning, so I slept in till like 2. It's like 3:30 now. So I'm still like morning brain. Yeah. I was trying to fight off a cold, and it appears that I have. But yeah, I'm still half asleep, I think. So yeah. But I plied the spindle singles with the wheel singles, and I got this skein. This is Gotland wool, and it's naturally colored, beautiful gray. I got to see some Gotland sheep at the farm show this year, and I think they are beautiful, beautiful sheep. I mean, all sheep are beautiful, let's face it, but I particularly liked the look of the Gotland sheep, and I'm really excited that I already had some Gotland wool that I could spin. So I got this back for Tour de Fleece last year, so I've had it for a while, but I finally finished it. I was hoping to Navajo ply this, chain ply it, but because I didn't want to, I'm still having trouble getting the hang of chain plying on my spinning wheel, so I just 2-plied this, and it worked out. So it's a pretty big skein, and it's pretty much all of the Gotland wool. Excuse me. Pretty much all of the Gotland wool. However, I do still have, it's wrapped up with a little piece of yarn right now to hold in the twist, but I do still have this little ball of Gotland singles. And it's kind of too small to make a whole other skein with, but it's too big to waste. So I'm going to hold on to this and use it to like sample something that requires an already spun single. Maybe like core spinning or something like that. We'll see. I don't know if Gotland is really the best for core spinning now that I think of it. But I'm just keeping it, letting it hang around so that I can experiment with it. So that is skein number 5 for the week. And I'm not even done yet. In case you haven't figured this out yet, all of my FOs this week are spinning finished objects. So I've kind of been spinning out of control this week. Like a spinning fiend. But I'm really happy with all the progress that I've made. So that's all that matters, right? Next up, basically this week, I was very disciplined about what I was spinning because I had some things I really wanted to spin, but felt like I shouldn't yet because I had other older things that I should really spin. So I was working my way through things. So I finished the hemp because I had started that last week and because I've had that hemp for quite a while. Then I did that mystery bat so that I could have that done and out of my life. Then I did the Gotland, which was also a languishing whip. And I told myself that if I did all of those things, then I would be able to spin this. And this is that gorgeous, lovely art bat that my sister-in-law gave me for my birthday. It's primarily alpaca with a little bit of silk and Firestar nylon. But mostly, now that it's spun up, I mostly just see the alpaca and little kind of pops of silk color. And I'll show this to you close up. So the white is the bat. And then this was my first attempt at plying with something that was not a hand-spun single. This is some of the tencel weaving yarn thread something or other that I got from Scraps and Skeins for a incredibly reasonable price. And so there were bits of purpliness in this bat. I'm trying to look for a pop of purple, and I can't find it. But trust me that there were, well, you might be able to see some right there. It's different than the ply. There were some pops of this purple color, along with some pops of, like, you can see a little blue there, and then the Firestar nylon is red. But so I thought that this purple thread would just kind of pull it all together and make a really interesting skein, because it was a tiny bat, so there's not a whole lot of yardage from this, so I really didn't want to cut it in half. So I did some thread plying, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. I feel like a broken record saying that, but honestly, I'm happy with how all of my spinning turns out because I'm just learning, and so anything is a good product for me. I'm sure this is not good by any professional spinner's standards, but it's good for me. I'm really happy with it. So that's skein, let's see, skein number 6 for the week. And then my last FO, you guessed it, more hand spun. This was also part of my disciplined plan. I said after I spun all those, all that hemp and the bat and the Gotland that I didn't really feel so enthusiastic about spinning. After I spun that, I could spin that beautiful alpaca bat. And then after I did that, I could treat myself to another exciting spin, which I was both excited for and dreading, so I figured it's kind of discipline and reward at the same time. And Mary tried to help me with this a lot because I had the little bits of it all over the couch, and she loves to eat anything that looks like hair or thread or anything. We'll find her just like munching on cobwebs at the bottom of a chair or something. Not that we have a lot of cobwebs, but there are some, and she likes to munch them, and it's super weird. But let me just get to the yarn, shall I? I spun this super crazy lock spun skein of yarn. And so, of course, I had locks laying all over my couch that I had teased apart and kind of just jumbled together in a random order to spin this. And so she was trying to snack on them and run off with them, but I think that I saved them all. And these locks are Leicester Longwool locks. Say that 10 times fast. But Leicester Longwool locks. And I got these at the farm show on my birthday. And I was thinking about, I was having a really hard time deciding what I wanted to do with these locks. Because I was looking up spinning with locks, and I just kept coming across tail spinning, where you're spinning a single and then you randomly like add in, you pull apart the single as you're spinning, add in a tail or a lock, and then you spin the lock into it so that most of the lock is still sticking out. And I do want to try that at some point, but that's not what I envisioned for these locks. So I finally found just spinning yarn out of pure locks and nothing else. And that's what I did. And then, because my single was, of course, terribly out of balance, I just plied it with some sewing thread. And it's really rough, but I think that's kind of the point. So I'm pretty darn happy with how this turned out. At the risk of sounding like a super broken record. But yeah, it's got these lovely light blues and dark blues, and it's getting kind of washed out, but this is like a beautiful seafoam green and purple, and then these gorgeous shades of red. So this was my last full FO of the week, my last spinning project where I completely spun all of the wool. And so it produced this lovely, chunky, beautiful skein. And I have no clue what I'm going to do with this because I'm really bad right now about knitting with my hand spun. But I really want to get better at that this year. So there is my last FO. So that brings the total, I believe, to 4, 5, 6, 7 skeins of yarn. And while I was putting down the yarn, Mary was like, "You're petting me, right?" So now I have to pet her. But that means 7 skeins of yarn, completely done, except that I have to set the twist on every single one of them. But I figure it's easier to set the twist on a lot of skeins at once. So I will get to this at some point, but I have another spinning whip, and once I am done with that spinning whip, I will set the twist on all of the skeins from this past week and that whip. So yeah, I think I'm going to take a quick break before I get to works in progress, because I'm getting a little chilly. So I'm gonna go grab a sweater or something. Alright, I'm back and all warmed up. So let's move on to works in progress, shall we? I didn't make much progress on this whip, but there is some visible progress. So I worked a little bit on my Prisoner of Azkaban style Gryffindor scarf, and as you can see, I got the first repeat of the little double yellow stripes done. I'm using the pattern by Rachel Alexandra on Ravelry, and I'm just knitting this out of Red Heart in this burgundy color and this gold color. This is for Katie of Inside Number 23's Harry Potter cowl. And so I'm hoping that this is really an easy project, which I think is why I'm not making much progress on this, because it's not the most exciting of things. It's just round and round and round. But I'm hoping to keep working on this a lot more so that I don't think I'll finish this for the February entry, but hopefully I can finish it for March or something. And I have some other projects that I can whip up really quickly for February. So yeah, let's hope maybe every week I can get another stripe repeat done or something. Maybe that's a good goal to work towards, because that means eventually I'll get it done. So first whip. My second whip is over here. It's in my owl bag. So if you've watched the most recent episodes, you'll probably know what this is, because it's the project that lives in my owl bag. And it is the vanilla sock with gusset and heel of choice. And the pattern is by Joe Tor. And these are socks for Paul. So they're pretty big, because he's got bigger feet than I do. Let me get the needles out of the way. And as you can probably see, I have turned the heel. I really have no clue what the best way is to show off socks while they're on the needle, 2 at a time. But I hope you can see there that I've turned the heel. I now have a heel, 2 heels in fact, because these are 2 at a time socks. And these are my first toe-up socks. So that was really fun to learn how to do a toe-up heel. I haven't quite decided which I like better yet, but I think I really liked these toe-up ones. And the yarn for these is Mountain Colors. They're Barefoot Base, which is superwash merino and nylon, in the pine cone color, which again is these lovely shades of brown that in different lights look almost purpley and orangey and brown. But in my light, they all look fairly brown. And actually, I started liking the look of these a lot more, the look of the way the yarn knits up. I started liking it a lot more after we drove a couple hours south to go to an appointment at one point over the past couple of weeks. And there's this rock formation that we always pass, and Paul is kind of a geology geek, among being a geek in lots of other things. But there's this rock formation that perfectly shows the folded mountains of Pennsylvania, because it was like spliced out to make way for the road to go through. And so you can see a cross section of a little bit of folded mountain, and it looks actually a lot like this. It has different shades of brown that almost look purple and orange and everything, and literally every single time that we drive by those rocks, Paul goes, "Ooh, look, rock strata." And so he really loves them, and we were driving by them while I was knitting these socks, and I was like, wow, that looks a lot like the rock strata this yarn does. So now we both like it a lot more. I was not so sure about this hand-dyed yarn at first, because I'm not a huge fan of the pooling and the kind of random variegated stripy nature of it, but it really does look like the rock strata. So yeah. And now I'm working slowly on the legs, and I've seen a guide that kind of says that if you fold the sock at the heel, you want your leg to be at least as long as the toe. So I'm slowly working my way up the leg to finish these socks. Hopefully I can discipline myself to work on these a lot more, especially since it's Valentine's Day and I feel like I should be already finished with these socks for my dear sweet husband, and so I might work on these out of guilt today. Second whip. My next whip is actually right here by the camera. For the Yarn Love Challenge, one of the day's prompts was about travel knitting. And I had already shared a picture of those socks for an earlier day on it was a prompt on like currently working on or something, and it was the day that we were traveling, and so I had those socks with me, and I said, well, these are great travel projects. So I felt like it would be boring to just post a picture of the socks again for the travel projects day. So I decided, I did include them in my travel projects post, but I decided to also cast on a project that's representative of another one of my favorite types of travel projects, and that is a doily. This looks really just kind of jumbly right now because it's in the early stages and doilies always look really jumbly. But it's in this lovely, I'm not a huge fan of crocheting just plain white doilies. I mean, they have their place for sure, but I have so many great colors of crochet thread, so I thought I'd go with this. It's kind of appropriate for Valentine's Day, to be honest. And the pattern for this is the Primal Light doily. It's on Ravelry, and I meant to look up the designer of this pattern before I started podcasting, but of course I didn't. So I will put that in the show notes below. But Primal Light doily, and currently I'm just kind of working on the little inside part, which just looks kind of loopy and all that, but also really pretty. I'm just a big fan of crochet lace, to be honest. And I really like this as a travel project because it's very compact. The thread is compact and easy to travel with, but there's also a ton of thread on here. So I don't run the risk of running out of projects to work on if I take a doily with me. And the other thing is that if I print out the doily pattern beforehand, it's also really easy to follow. And like, I know people like sock knitting because it's just like around and around and around and it's easy to think about while you travel, but doilies aren't that much harder to think about. You have to think at the beginning and the end of every round, but during the middle of the round it's mostly just going around the circle, and you learn the pattern as you go, and I just really like it. It's a nice, relaxing travel project to work on. So yeah, I figured I'd cast this on for a picture of a representative of one of my favorite traveling projects. And I'm going to try to crochet doilies while traveling a lot more now, because I really, really like the doily lace. I find it a really nice challenge, but also pretty easy. Like, doilies look super complicated, but most of the time they really, really aren't. And there's so many traditional sorts of patterns and styles and everything. So I'm kind of a doily dork, I guess. But I'm pretty happy with this so far. As I am with everything, apparently. I'm gonna get a sip of water and move on to my next work in progress. So I actually got some progress done this week on another languishing whip for Paul, which is the British driving cap that goes with the British driving knucks that I already finished and have just to weave in all of the ends and put on patches and everything, and I'm severely neglecting it. But I decided I should work on this a bit at least, because if I can get the hat done, then I'll feel really guilty about the gloves, and then I will try to finish them too. So the hat is in 3 parts. There's an increase section, and then a knit straight section, and then a decrease section, and that forms the top part of the hat. It's kind of like a golf style hat if you're trying to picture it, and the pattern is by Anne Carroll Gilmore, and it's in the book Knitting Hats and Mittens from Around the World. So it's got these lovely cables and moss stitch and everything, and I've got a cat who's headbutting me. But yeah, so I finished the third of the hat with the increases this week. So if I can try to each week finish another third of the hat, then I'll be done fairly soon. Except that you also have to knit the actual, like, circular part of the hat then. This is just the top. But pretty happy with this. It's kind of a large mustache or beard or something. It's kind of like a doctor's mask. Yeah, that's it. And the yarn for this is Simplicity by Haiku, which I think is a Scocell yarn. It's merino nylon acrylic, I think. I always forget the information about this yarn. I know the colorway is Seattle Sky, this lovely gray color. So yeah, I will put the full information about the yarn below. Next up is a project that I just started based on a library book. I went to the library and I got lots of great fibery books, and I'm going to share a few of them with you in a little bit. But one of them was, two of them actually. I rechecked out the Mason-Dixon knitting books, the original book, and then the Outside the Lines book. So in the first book, the original, they reproduce a dishcloth pattern from a ball band, and it's like this lovely brick texture. And then in the Outside the Lines book, they take that dishcloth pattern and turn it into a mop cover, like for a Swiffer type mop. And I've been getting, since I started bullet journaling, I've worked out this whole like chore schedule so we can keep our house neater, because in case you haven't been able to tell by my strategic angling of the camera, my house is not very clean. It's rather messy. In fact, I'm going to show you quick a picture that I was reluctant to share as part of the Yarn Love Challenge because the prompt was where I craft. And my crafting corner is frankly a mess. And it's right over next to me. And it is just rather chaotic. There's a basket where I just kind of throw whips, and there's whips under the table there, and there's all sorts of tools on the top. And it's just chaos. I'm a very chaotic crafter. And I'm trying to embrace that. But also, I want my house to be a bit clean. So, bullet journaling has helped me set a chore schedule. And one of the things I want to do more often is to mop our tile floors. So, we're going to get a Swiffer. And I'm knitting up some reusable Swiffer covers from this Mason-Dixon knitting pattern. The pattern is actually called Swifty. And I just have a whole bunch of cotton here. I'm actually going to try to pick up this basket. Oh gosh, excuse the reaching. This basket is just full of cotton. Let's face it, cotton yarn is like the candy of the yarn shop. It's just like little tiny balls of brightly colored yarn, and it's like being in a candy shop. So I've got all sorts of yarn in here that I don't use very often, and I've got tile floors that I don't mop very often. So it's kind of the perfect match. So I started knitting up this lovely brick sort of pattern, and then it'll be turned into a mop cover soon. And hopefully I can knit several more of these then in different colors. And right now I'm kind of going with a Valentine's Day theme because it's Valentine's Day. So, and then I still have more whips. And the next whip is my Yarn Love. And so I just have to, it's buried a bit here. This week I started, as a reward for all of that other spinning that I've done, I started spinning a treat. Let me see if I can pull one of these out of here without getting it too messed up. I started spinning these Aurora Borealis Rolags. Here's the bag with the rest of them in it. I just love the bright pops of color from this silk. This is by Fellview Fibers, and it's merino, is the black content, and then the little bright pops of color are silk, I believe. And then, as you might have been able to see too, there is a lot of Angelina in here, and together it just looks like the northern night sky. And I just couldn't resist these Rolags, and then I couldn't resist spinning them. So I resisted as long as I could by forcing myself to finish other spinning before I started these. But then I finished everything that I said I must spin first. Excuse me. And so I may have spun half of my Rolags already. It's still on the nitty knotty because I just finished this last night. And plus I thought it would be a nice way to show it off. So I am just absolutely in love with how this yarn turned out. Again, that's the end. My yarn is not fraying. So it's got these pops of Northern Lights colors in it, and then even from a distance, and even on the camera that always seems to have trouble picking this up, you can see all of the Angelina sparkle. It's just absolutely fantastic. Again, I just two-plied this because I didn't want to waste any yardage on this beautiful, gorgeous yarn. And so this is, I believe, 5 of the roll eggs spun up, and then I have 5 more to go. So they might be a skein of yarn by the end of today. We'll see. They'll be a skein very, very soon. And so I absolutely love how this has turned out. I love this teal. I love the pinks and the blues and the purples and the black and the sparkle. This is my yarn love. And I'm really glad that I finished this last night, because now I can share it on Instagram when I'm done as my yarn love post for the Yarn Love Challenge. It's just absolutely beautiful. And these are my first roll eggs that I've ever spun as well. So that was super fun. They were both easier to draft and harder to draft than I was expecting. And so that was kind of a fun challenge. And I think I ended up with a fairly fine yarn, but there are still some thick bits here and there. That's pretty fine. But like, this purple up here is not quite so fine. But really happy with how this turned out. Again, I need to find a different thing to say about my projects. So, and then, oh, I still have a couple more whips. First off, I have a yarn that I've been trying to dye, and it's still not the way I'd like it. I just got a call in the middle of the podcast, which is the reason for the awkward jump cut. But Paul was at the grocery store getting a few things I asked him to pick up. And one of those things was food coloring, because I've been trying to dye up some yarn, and it is not as dark red as I would like it to. It's more on the pink spectrum of things. And this is a skein of just Patton's worsted wool that I am trying to dye up so that I can knit it into a Newt Scamander style Gryffindor scarf, like the beautiful faded Hufflepuff scarf that he wore in the Fantastic Beasts movie. The second I saw that, I was like, I need one of those for my own house. So I've been trying to dye a Gryffindor style skein, and I like the variations in the color here, but it just doesn't go dark enough for me. So luckily I can over dye it again, and the only problem is that I used up all of my red food coloring trying to dye this, so I need some more. But yeah, so it's a work in progress, because I did make some progress on it, but it's totally not done yet. And then I also have another ball of white yarn that I need to dye up in a golden color, and I haven't attempted that yet. I want to get this red the right color first. So hopefully I can work on this some more this week. And then, last but not least, I was working at my sewing machine a bit this week. I showed you those fabrics that I got to attempt to make some reusable cloth pads, and it recommends that you first secure the ends of the fabric by stitching on them, and then pre-wash them, because your pads are going to need to be washed, and so you don't want them to shrink on you. So I've been trying to kind of zigzag around the fabric so that I can pre-wash it. So this cotton fabric is completely zigzagged. It's not the neatest of zigzags, but I figure it will work. This is the first time I've ever used the zigzag function on my sewing machine. My mom's sewing machine, I should say. I'm just all about borrowing things. And I'm really grateful that my mom and my aunt have both let me borrow various things so that I can further my fiber fanaticism. But, yeah, so it was the first time I've ever used the zigzag function, so I figured I should start with cotton, because that'll be the easiest. So I finished all the cotton, and then I moved on to the fleece. And as you might be able to tell, this edge is still not zigzagged, because I ran into some issues. Let me find what is zigzagged. I was having a lot of trouble. If you can see, that's not really a zigzag. And I was having a lot of trouble with this. So that's about where I stopped with the zigzagging of the fleece. And I should really try to look up how to properly zigzag it. Although I just found that my machine also has an overlocker stitch, so I'll see if maybe that would help instead. But I have a hunch that it's more about the needle, because it's not a very heavy-duty needle. But hoping to finish that soon. And then I still have to zigzag the 2 yards of flannel that I got for the core. And then, well, I guess I'll talk about this in a little bit, because it's more in the line of acquisitions. Actually, I could talk about it now, because I'm done with whips and on to acquisitions. So I've got a little bit more fabric that I'm going to need to zigzag and pre-wash. And the reason that I have this fabric is because I got a book in the mail that I had ordered, and I'm super excited about it. I heard about this book from Katie of Inside Number 23, and if you've watched her podcast, which I'm sure you have because it's wonderful, she does a lot of garment sewing, and there's one book in particular she really recommends, and a website for that matter, that she really recommends for beginners, because this designer is really good at making patterns that are great for beginners and great for teaching you new skills. So the book is Love at First Stitch, Demystifying Dressmaking. And it's by Tilly Walms, is how I would pronounce that, but I really don't know, so I'm very sorry. And it is just the most wonderful book. So I got some fabric to start the very first project in the book, which is this Brigitte scarf. Lovely kind of headscarf / could be used on your neck as well. This is the first of the patterns, and it teaches you some basic sewing skills. And I probably already know most of the skills for this, but I think it looks really pretty, and it can't hurt to make the pattern anyway. So I got some fabric for that, and then I also got, let me flip to the next pattern after the Brigitte scarf. I'm just having all sorts of problems. Actually, I didn't get something for the next pattern. I got something for the pattern after that. So the third pattern in the book is this Delphine skirt, and I would love to get into garment making, and I figure skirts are a great place to start. So I got some unbleached muslin so that I can practice getting the right fit on that skirt before I invest in nice, pretty fabric. So this is the first time I'll be making a muslin for that. And then I have the fabric here for my Brigitte scarf. It's going to be a bit of a different Brigitte scarf. It's not like the most professional looking fabric, but I saw it and I was like, I would totally wear a scarf in that. And I think that the people that I that I encounter would totally appreciate a scarf made out of this. So I got this fabric that says, "You had me at woof." And it's got these lovely little paisley kind of retro patterns, but in the middle are dogs. And also, living in the State College area, these colors are just quite appropriate for a certain school that happens to be nearby. So I got actually a lot of this fabric, so I'm going to have way more than just what is needed for the scarf. So I'm not quite sure what I'll do with the rest of it yet, but I'm really excited to make a scarf out of this. And once again, I need to zigzag the edges so I can pre-wash it. But this is one of my acquisitions for the week. Next up in acquisitions, I've been watching the Yarn Hoarder podcast, and she makes a lot of these dish scrubbies. They're not like dishcloths, they're just little like scrubby thingies. They kind of look like, oh, I'm just totally blanking on the name. That like metal meshy wool stuff that you can scrub things with, only these are a lot less harsh on your dishes. And so I got a skein of Red Heart Scrubby from just Walmart, because they have like the cheapest prices for Red Heart Scrubby. And this is the ocean color, just a pretty blue. And so this is just 100% polyester with these little kind of pigtails coming off the yarn. And I know these are pigtails because of some of the library books that I've gotten. And I've been getting some pigtails on my yarn at times unintentionally when I'm plying, because it's just when one ply kind of has more slack than the other one, so you get the pigtails. But this is really good for scrubbiness. So she uses a nylon net dishcloth or dish scrubby pattern that's crocheted out of nylon netting, but then she also makes a version with these Red Heart Scrubby yarns, and so I thought it would just be fun to try out. And in the interest of trying to keep up with chores more often, I figured handmade stuff will make me more excited about chores. So hopefully these will be some dish scrubbies within the next week. So that's my stash enhancements. And then I just ordered another stash enhancement that is already shipped and on its way, which I'm super excited about. And I won't say much about it yet, except that it is for feeding my insatiable spinning desires. So obviously it's spinning fiber, and I'm super excited that hopefully it will be here by the next time I podcast and I can show you what I ordered. But for now, I'm going to keep it a secret. So next, I'm going to move my wonderful sewing book out of the way so that I can show you. I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of my favorite library finds. One of these books I had already looked at months and months ago, but now that I'm getting more into spinning, I am finding it more interesting because I can actually do some of the things in this book now, and it's the Spinner's Book of Yarn Designs by Sarah Anderson. And so this book is pretty cool. It's published by Story Publishing, which might not mean a lot to a lot of people, but I find that I love just about every book that Story Publishing makes. They don't just do books on knitting and spinning and stuff. They have like books on gardening and on cooking and all sorts of like home type stuff. They have some homesteading books that I love, and yeah, they just have a lot of great books. So it's no surprise that this one is great. But basically, This book teaches you a lot of different techniques for yarns. It has the basic stuff like plying into a 2-plier, 3-plier, singles, but then it has stuff about like how to add beads to yarns. It's got all sorts of novelty yarns. Here I actually flipped open to a page on how to make pigtails in yarn, which is what I just talked about with the red heart. And then there's all sorts of things in here that are just wonderful. It's got stuff in here on core yarns and cable yarns and bouclés, which is why I'm particularly excited about this, because I want to start making some bouclés. I'm trying to find a picture of the bouclé that I really liked. Yeah. I have some mohair, and I really want to try to do this with it, because I just love the look of that. So that's part of why I got this book out again, because I have mohair to spin, and I needed to know how to spin it. So this is a great book. I already knew this was a great book, but I just thought I'd share it with you in case you didn't know it's a great book. But I found another awesome book that I hadn't seen. I go to my library fairly often, and I know exactly where the craft section of the library is. Like, I know it by heart. I just go right to it. And I read other books too. I love all kinds of books, but I always go to, even if I just go for like a novel to the library, I always also end up going to the craft section. And even if I only intended to bring home a book or two, I always end up with a stack like this big of craft books. And this was one of the books that I hadn't seen before in that section. So it is the Encyclopedia of Hand Knitting by Mabel Ross, or Hand Spinning, I'm sorry. And it's a bit of an older book. The pages are kind of yellowing a little. I don't know when it was published. It's an Interweave Press publication, and it was published in 1988. So it's a bit older. But I opened this book up and immediately just loved it, because it is literally an encyclopedia of hand spinning. So I just flipped to a random page right here. There's an encyclopedia entry on linen spinning in Ireland, and then a separate one about linen spinning in Scotland. And then there's a little entry for lint, which is apparently the name for cotton fibers which have separated from the seeds. I did not know that. There's different sections on the different sorts of fiber animals and the different sorts of animal fibers. Different ways of drafting, like there's long draw here right now. I read a great section. I'm just literally reading through this encyclopedia right now, and I'm just starting B right now, but I read about the Ashford spinning wheels, and I really enjoyed reading about that, because the wheel that my aunt is letting me borrow is an Ashford, and I didn't realize how innovative Ashford was as a company. So it was really awesome to hear about them. So this is such a fascinating book, because it's got a lot about the history of spinning and also different spinning traditions, and I am learning some things about learning things that are improving my spinning as well. So it's a fantastic book, and if I can't read through all of this before I return it to the library, I might try to find a copy of my own, because this is a book that I would just go back to over and over again. So, I think I will take another quick break, and then I will come back to talk about goals. So my last segment here is about goals. I really like this segment because it kind of helps hold me accountable, even though a lot of times I just end up ignoring the goals that I have after I finish filming the podcast. But then when I go to write my show notes for next week, I will look at the show notes for this week, and then I'll feel a little guilty for ignoring all those goals, and then I might do something about it. So my goals for this week would be, as I said, to try to finish Paul's socks. And that's especially a goal for me because I really want to start a new pair of socks, and I really shouldn't have 2 pairs on the needles at a time. I know lots of people can do that. I am not one of those people. And the reason I want to cast on new socks is because I got some sock yarn on sale. It is, I've shown this before, but it is this Patton's Croy socks. The colorway is Clover Colors, and I just really like the look of that. These are going to be socks for me, and what I'm thinking of doing is knitting these into my very first pair of Hermione's Everyday Socks, which would also double as an entry into Inside Number 23's Harry Potter cowl. So I would like to start these so that maybe they can be like my finished object for March or something soon. And so particularly, I saw these and thought they would make good Hermione's Everyday Socks because they're a very foresty sort of color, and so I'm thinking of calling them my Forest of Dean socks, in honor of the forest that Hermione and her family would go camping in, and which she later brought her and Ron and Harry to when they needed to hide out in the Deathly Hallows. So, yeah, I think these would make great Hermione's Everyday Socks, and I want to start them, but I need to finish Paul's socks first. Additionally, I want to make progress on my Gryffindor scarf. I want to do lots of Harry Potter knitting this week, because that makes me happy, and it's always good to be happy. I also want to try and find something that I can make out of these 2 beautiful skeins of Cascade Heritage Wave that my family got me from Twist, which is an awesome knitting and spinning shop, and they got this for me for my birthday. And I'm just thinking, since it's 200 grams of sock yarn, I want to try and find like a shawl that I can make with it. So if anyone has any suggestions for great sock yarn shawls, I would love to hear them, because I really want to cast this on into something. I just don't know what to cast it onto yet. And then I also have the goal to overdye my red Newt Scamander yarn, and then also dye this ball of yarn into a nice golden color so that I can start casting on the Newt Scamander style Gryffindor scarf. And then there's my other yarn. My last goal is also a Harry Potter goal. I want to cast this gray Woolies yarn into a Hermione's Cable and Eyelet hat, the hat that she wears in the movie. Yeah, so I figured that this might be my best chance of finishing a project in February. So I want to cast this on so that I can enter that into the February giveaway thread. So those are my goals for the week. I'm sure I have more. Of course, my goal is also to finish spinning those Aurora Borealis rollags, but I don't really need to write that down as a goal, because I know that I will get that done because I'm super excited about it. So I'm saying some of the goals that I might have a harder time starting. like also getting some scrubbies done and the Swiffer pad covers things. And also finishing all of the zigzagging of fabrics so that I can pre-wash these. Because I would love to do some more sewing next week, but I can't really until I pre-wash my fabrics. So I think that's about everything for this week. So I will wish you a happy belated Valentine's Day, whether you celebrate it or not. And happy Yarn Love Challenge Month. Check out Instagram for lots of great posts about that. And I will see you next week. Bye.